And then my daughter Rosalind is a joyful little person. She has been all her life, and now that she's getting close to 40, I would say she's a happy girl. And our son Peter, who's a police officer in Toronto, has always been very shy, so he's bashful. And then our son David makes documentary films and has just come back from England to Canada after filming World War I battlefields. So he would be Doc, you see, for documentary. And that just basically leaves Grumpy and Dopey. Well, I must confess to you, I woke up Grumpy this morning, but she went back to sleep. And after a remark like that from a married man, you realize who's Dopey, don't you? You see, so. But the one I didn't mention to you was Sleepy. Sleepy, and that's our daughter Janet. Janet is about 38, and she loves to stay up late, and she loves to sleep all day. And when she was a teenager, those years when it's a landmine to go near the room, I was the one designated in the mornings to go down and wake her up. So I would go downstairs and pace up and down in front of the door and then quietly knock on it and wait for the first snarl. We didn't have a dog. I was so hoping we had a dog and that it wasn't her inside making that noise, but it was. And so I thought, what would you do if you took the 60th chapter of Isaiah text and you went to Sleepy's door and you knocked on it and read the text out loud? What would happen? Would you be taking your life in your hand? Let's try it. Arise, shine, for your light has come. I don't want to. The glory of the Lord has risen upon you. That's too strange, it's too intrusive, it's too confrontational, and it's far too cheerful for this time of day. Darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness the people. That's how it is out there, isn't it? No landmarks. You think I'm coming out of here into a world with no landmarks? No such luck. Go away. You are the doorway, the one who is nearest the light. You know, that's just a little too stressful to hear so early in the morning, that my particularities could be of use to something so sacred and profound that I have to come out of the darkness of this room to welcome it into my world. The whole world will come to your rising. You're telling me that what I could be involved in is something greater than politics and greater than roadblocks and customs and taboos? Are you telling me I might be standing next to Martin Luther King, who near the very end of his life was heard to say, I might not get there with you, but it doesn't matter to me now, for I have seen the glory of the coming of the... Is that what you're asking me to come out of this room and do, because the whole world will come to my rising? You will recognize one another, those nameless, faceless crowd you once knew, now as your own family. I don't want to see family this early in the day. Thank you very much. But I stay at that door and I knock on that door because it is essential that all the sleepy ones come out of there. They were not meant to live sleeping their lives away. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, used to tell a story of the parable of the geese. And the geese would sit in the farmyard and eat and get fat and be picked off and slaughtered at the high seasons. And one of the geese realized that they had wings and there was a destiny to fulfill. And the goose would cry out, fly, fly, lift up your wings and fly beyond this entrapment. And the geese would never listen. Poor Kierkegaard would write, banging on that door against the darkness. Well, how much light is enough, do you think? Once you've come out of the room and you're no longer asleep, how much light is enough? Is it enough simply to stir and to function? Is that enough light in life, or is it enough to feel familiar? I say to myself, beware foothills living. You see enough of the brightness to know it's a lovely broad world, but you have enough of familiarity that you don't have to do anything about it. I think a lot of folk live in what I'd call foothills living. Beware that. Someone has told us now that the churches are in some difficulty all over the world because after 1,500 years, we finally come out from under the heel of the Constantinian exile. That is, when the Emperor Constantine made the Roman Empire Christian, he basically took over the corporation and changed it. And now that the corporation and empire have shifted elsewhere, the churches are left behind as detritus in the sand. No one cares about us particularly anymore. We've fallen below the radar of cultural life, and for the first time in 1,500 years, we're finally out from under the heel of the Constantinian exile. You know, I like the Constantinian exile. We get tax-free credit where I live for being in the church, and being a clergyman, you get some value in the society, not as much as you used to. In our country, nurses are the highest valued people, and a nurse can find access to virtually any home in Canada. Way down the list are other occupations to which doors are locked, but clergy are still within about the top 5. And even if people don't go to church much in Canada, if a clergyman were to come to your door, the chances are you would admit him or her at least into the front hall with some measure of trust. That's wonderful. That's the result of the Constantinian oppression. I like that. And to step outside that and to be a person of faith in a new world, in a fuller light, is often more of a challenge than I think I want. How do you feel about that? Too much of a challenge? And yet the purpose of living, it seems to me, is found in the ascent, in climbing towards that mountaintop you've seen there where the light shines, even if you never fully reach it. Somehow the purpose is to climb for it. Come with me to a land that I will show you, said the sacred to Moses, who was as reluctant to go as you and I are on any given day. That light shines for me most brilliantly in the final sign of John's Gospel, the raising of Lazarus. Now, I have wrestled personally with this story, the raising of Lazarus, for the last 3 years, have made pages and pages of copious notes about it, trying to figure out this Rubik's Cube of a story. And when I was thinking about this second sermon in the series, I thought, why not dump it onto the people of Australia? They can wrestle with it with me. It is such a majestic tale of the light. It is as tough as climbing the last few meters to the top of Mount Everest. I sat once with a group of 500 Boy Scouts early in the morning, and someone who'd actually climbed Mount Everest was telling them and me what it was like. He said at the very top there's very little oxygen, so you're in an oxygen tank and you're standing against a wall of sheer ice, a vertical wall 500 feet up to the top. And you're standing there against the wall, gripping the ice with your hands and your feet, and then slowly, because there's no oxygen, he said to us in the room, count to 25, and we all counted 25. He said, okay, now lift your one foot and kick with your toe enough to make a toe hold, and put your foot into it, and then count another 25, and we all did. Now raise your hand up and scrape a piece where you can grip your fingers, and then count another 25, and we did. Now lift your other hand, and he went on like this. He said it took hours and hours and hours to climb the last few feet up sheer ice to conquer Everest. Well, that story of Lazarus, the raising of Lazarus, has that kind of feel about it for me. Look at the way he lived in the town of Bethany. He had his troubles there, says the story. We all have troubles living in any town in which we live, and the troubles have to do with valley life. They stress the differences between us. He and his family and others of the early community of faith had found faith in this messianic figure who'd come among them. The church had found faith in him too, and it made them slightly different from their neighbors. And you began to get that irritation factor in a small community where some folk are not speaking to you anymore and some are looking at you a little oddly, and that takes its toll. That's the toll of valley life. It's troubles. You get a strong sea wind blowing against you all the time, and it begins to wear you down. And then it speaks about Lazarus' illness, and that's the point about the valley air. Every so often you find you're being peppered by small stones every so often. Just an attitude, just an outlook, people peppering you with small stones. It's called getting a wound that turns septic. You don't notice right away that you've been wounded, but But the pain doesn't go away. In fact, it gets worse. And there are lots of people in church lives where I live whose wounds have turned septic. Something was said to them at the door. It wasn't intentionally meant to be hurtful, but it got under their skin, or they were refused a decision, or they didn't like the way a meeting went, and they went home, and nobody phoned about them. Nobody picked up the fact that they were discouraged, and instead of sloughing it off as they would usually do, the wound went inside and they became